Hello friends, welcome back to Dinas Academy. And in this lesson, we are going to discuss about modal verbs. Modal verbs are a fundamental part of English because they express obligations, abilities, probabilities, suggestions, and much more. Hence, learning how to use modal verbs can really improve your level of fluency. So, before knowing how to use these verbs, it's very important to know what actually the modal verbs are. These are the special verbs that we use in combination with another verb. In fact, most modal verbs have no real meaning without another verb. Each modal verb describes either how, why, or when an action happens. In fact, these verbs are a type of auxiliary verbs, that is, helping verb. They are used together with the main verb of the sentence. Alright, let's see the main modal verbs. There are 10 modal verbs and they are will, would, shall, should, must, ought to, can, could, may, and might. So these are the 10 modal verbs. And let's know how to make a sentence using the modal verbs. The great thing about modal verbs is that they all follow three simple rules. That is, to make affirmative sentence, the second one negative sentence, and the third one interrogative sentence. And now let's understand the usage of modal verbs with affirmative sentence. These are the same for all subjects, which means you don't need to add yes to the third person singular. Let's look at the chart closely. There are three columns given in the chart, and the first column we can see the pronouns, and in the second column the modal verbs, and in the third column main verbs. And we can frame the affirmative sentences using the modal verbs given in the second column, like first one, I will go, or I would go, or I shall go, or he, she, it will go, and so on. And all the sentences that are framed now are affirmative sentence and they do not need to add yes to the third person singular. And the second type of sentence is negative sentence. To make negative sentence using the modal verbs, we just add not. Look at the given table closely. It is quite similar to the table which we just saw in affirmative sentence. The only difference between that to this table is here we use the word not to make it a negative sentence. Like I will not or won't go, you will not or won't go, or he, she, it will not or won't go, and so on. And the third type of structure that we use in modal verbs are questions. To make questions, we invert the subject and the modal verb. For example, will I go, or will you go, or will he or she it go, and so on. Okay, guys, hope you understood the sentence structure that we use in the modal verbs. So, now let's look at the different situations in which we use the modal verbs. The first modal verb is will. This verb is used when the certainty that something will be done is to be communicated. For example, I will pay my student fees. When the modal verb will is used, it means that the action is certain to take place. So let's move to the next modal verb, that is would. This modal verb indicates a condition. It is possible that the action will take place, but another condition has to be met. The phrase including the modal verb will be followed by a connective such as if. For example, I would pay my student fees if I had the money in my account. And you can notice here the connectivity if is used and hence it indicates a condition. And would is the past tense of the modal verb will. So let's move on to the next one, should and ought to. When the modal verbs should or ought to are used, it indicates that there is a requirement to carry out an action, but it has yet been completed. There could be many reasons why that the obligation has not been enacted. Usually, a phrase, clause, or sentence will explain why the action has not yet been completed. The connective but often links the clauses. For example, I should pay my fees, but I have not gotten around to doing it. An important note, guys, the slight difference between the two modal verbs is that ought to implies slightly less of an obligation than should. Okay, let's move on to the next type of modal verb, that is could. Could is a modal verb that indicates the ability is there to complete an action. However, the implication is offered that there is a reason for not having done what is required. For example, I could pay my fees, I have chosen not to. And a very important note, guys, could is a most powerful verb and is often used to imply a problem. The next modal verb is can. This modal verb demonstrates the ability to undertake an action. For example, my fees are overdue. I can pay them on Monday. Here you can see he has the ability to pay the fees on Monday. An important note, can cannot be used as a modal verb in the past tense. The word states that something will happen rather than has happened. Okay, let's move on to the next one, that is may. This is a modal verb which has a double purpose. It indicates the permission to do something and it also shows that there is a possibility that something may happen. When we use it for giving permission, it will often appear in a simple clause, sentence, or phrase. For example, you may pay my fees on my behalf. When we look at this example closely, you can notice the modal verb may is used for seeking a permission. And as we know that the modal verb may can also be used to show the possibility that something will happen. For example, my fees may be paid. And in the given example, may is used to show the possibilities. A word of caution, guys, may cannot be used as a verb in the past tense. So let's move to the next type of modal verb, that is shall. This verb shows that something will happen. However, a condition is often implied. Often, the connective when is used to connect the clauses. For example, I shall pay my fees as soon as my funds clear. Alright, the next type of modal verb is must. The modal verb must says that something will definitely be done or happen. It is a stronger word than will, implying that the action to take place is extremely important. For example, I must pay my fees or I will not be allowed to attend the lectures. And the next type of modal verb is might. This modal verb implies the possibility of something. When might is used, the outcome is in the balance. The implication is that something could happen or perhaps it will not. For example, I might pay my fees. Okay, these are the different forms of using the modal verbs. And when we sum up this all together, these modal verbs are mainly used in four different situations. The first one, to show a level of possibility. The second one, to indicate ability. The third one, to show obligation, that is a requirement to do something. And the last one, to give the permission. Okay, let's move on and understand the different circumstances in which we use the modal verbs. The first one, the modal verbs are used in making requests. In English, there are several ways we can make requests and with different levels of formality. For example, can you open the door for me? The second one, will you come to my party? And the next usage of modal verbs are they are used for asking and giving permission. For example, excuse me, could we sit here? The second one, can my kids play here? And the third use of modal verbs are they are used for describing abilities and possibilities. There are two modal verbs we use to describe ability, can and could. We use can to refer to the present and general abilities and could to refer to past abilities. For example, Joes can swim really well. The second one, she can meet us at 3:30. Let's see the examples for could. When I was younger, I could play the piano. The second one, they couldn't see me in the fog. Okay, Let's move on to the other usage of modal verbs. These verbs are used in making predictions. We can use a range of modal verbs to describe the future depending on how probable we think the event or situation is. For example, it will be hot tomorrow. When you look at this example, we use will because the event is 100% sure to happen. The same one can be used with one more modal verb like it may be hot tomorrow. Here, may is used because the possibility is not 100% sure, and the next usage of the modal verbs are they are used for describing obligations. The main modal verb we use to describe obligation is must. We can use it in the affirmative form to say something is mandatory and in the negative form to say something is prohibited. For example, they must prepare the order by 5 p.m. The next example, we mustn't park here, it's forbidden. An important note, guys, when we want to describe a milder obligation that is something important but not necessarily mandatory, we can use should instead of must. And the next usage is modal verbs are used in making suggestions. To make suggestions, we can use can, could, shall, and should. For example, we can have a game of tennis later. The second one, we could meet at 3 p.m. The third example, we should invite Rick and Olga too. These are the different circumstances in which we use the modal verbs, and the modal verbs are essential for many functions in English. So, guys, try putting them into practice when you speak and write to make yourself a fluent speaker. And that's all in this video. And if you really like the content and the effort that we are putting into this channel, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.